we are happy to see that senior advocate Amit Desai has joined us, and he had a flight to catch. So we are recording just before he's about to catch his flight. But I thank him for giving us his time on such an important issue. And we all saw what Justice Chandrachud said, that every remark made by a judge, is seen as a judgment and criticized on social media. In fact, armies of trolls get on and, make quite nasty comments. I mean, if they were reasonable, as in they read the whole comment in the context which was made, it was okay. But, you just take off a line and start to criticize a judge. That is somehow not right. And I think that is the spirit in which Justice Chandrachud also said it. What do you think about this?
So, Tarun, of course, first, again, always a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you very much. I think what Justice Chandrachud has talked about again is a problem which has been faced by the judiciary for now many years. And the question about balancing the needs of the social media, transparency in the courtroom, and ensuring that the dignity of the institution is maintained is very, very critical. Because if the institution is trolled down, then there will be no rule of law, because ultimately it's only if you have respect for the institution of the judiciary that people will actually implement the judgments that are delivered by the judiciary. So it's important to maintain and protect the institution from all the trolling that does happen. Now, in that context, it's essential to bear in mind that as we keep moving towards transparency in the judicial process, and Justice Chandrachud is clearly one of the outspoken proponents, because he likes the technology, he likes video conferencing, and therefore he'd like more people to actually watch what happens in the courtroom. It's also important for people to recognize and realize that what is being said by judges is an interaction that takes place along with the lawyers in the context of the facts of a particular case or the questions of law that arise, in order to flesh out the real issues. Now, if you have this kind of a dialogue between the bar and the bench, you probably get a much better outcome in terms of the justice that's delivered by a court. So these kind of comments that sometimes are made, and I don't call them comments because they're sometimes more inquiries to the lawyer who's participating, or to the litigant who's there, and that must always be read in the context in which this entire matter is being looked at. Understand what the judges are trying to achieve in the process. They're only trying to achieve some better responses so that you can actually get a better decision at the end of the day. It's not for any other reason. And I think the social media should be more educated about these things. We should be careful about the process of trolling that's happening, because that is something that does impact the institution as a whole. It's not about individuals, but institution. And I am a firm believer that unless the institution has the respect and the standing, the institution will fail. And if the judiciary fails, then obviously it's a very important leg of democracy, and we will really have problems. So I do appreciate what Justice Chandrachud has said. We've said it in many over years, or many matters. We've seen judges, their judgments have been criticized. In fact, we had an occasion where all kinds of serious allegations were made against a judge in the Bombay High Court, and he had to file a criminal complaint also against those people. So, it's important to bring this balance back, and there has to be some way to achieve that.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, versus also sharing, of course, that Justice Chandrachud has been one of our most open judges. He, in fact, says that not only digitized, but welcomes live streaming of proceedings, also welcomes. In fact, there was a strange incident when something was recorded and then that was leaked. He said, any which ways, it's said in open court. So he's been that way as a very open person, and coming from him, this is concerning because he feels about it. But thank you so much for making time for this one. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Advocate Rohan Shah, for making time and joining us. I know you were in transit and traveling, but you made time for us. And I want to ask you this, that Justice Chandrachud said that every social media thinks that every comment made by a judge is a judgment. In effect, you take statements out of context, and armies of trolls descend and, criticize the judge for a judgment. And it's been very all too common now. Can you, in about the next 3-4 minutes, explain us that what is the problem that we are facing here? And, if this continues, then what is the risk in that sense? Because while a judge is trying to arrive at a conclusion, he has to ask many questions, make observations. And if those are taken as a part of his judgment by people who don't understand how the court process works, what risk do we run as a society?
Tarun, as you rightly put it, it's very important for those who have the power of the social media in their hand that they understand the court process and they understand the distinction between a judgment and a query in the course of a hearing, where a judge is trying to elicit either information or arguments to help them reach a conclusion. I think the danger we have is that people who listen into comments by judges or questions by judges wrongly consider them as if that is ultimately the judgment of the judges or going to be the judgment of the judges. And I think it comes from a bankruptcy of understanding what the process in court is, right? I think, again, the risk that we run, whether the comment is mid-proceeding or whether the comment is in the context of a judgment, is really this, that, the Supreme Court has an extremely special and elevated position in our constitutional scheme. In terms of the interaction between the public and the judges, there are obviously protocols because of the high offices that the judges hold and the importance of the matters they do. Now, if we see from the time that we got to the constitutional framework, there was a certain position which was contemplated for our judges in the Supreme Court. But over a period of time, I think that position has got even more elevated. I think every important issue, constitutional, humanitarian, economic, social, political, goes to the Supreme Court. And therefore, the eyes of the nation are constantly on the Supreme Court. You would sort of now see in the morning papers, few of the leading newspapers have a box on the front page, today in the Supreme Court, which is really a reflection of the importance and complexity of the issues that the Supreme Court deals with. Now, if they have such a critical role in the administration of justice, as we all know, then they should really be left completely free and uninfluenced in the process of being able to deliver their justice. And I think social media has become a tool where sadly you are not getting honest and balanced comments, but issues are getting politicized, or people with a certain agenda are using this to sort of propagate their message. And if that includes critiquing judges, they're not stopping short. And I think there has to be a system, given the significance of what our Supreme Court and our honorable judges do, that they should not have to go through this sort of a process on a daily basis. And whether that requires some sort of a statutory framework or whether that requires some sort of discipline at the end of the social media institutions, I think it is imperative, because you're getting to a stage where these sort of frivolous comments are impeding the most critical role that the judges play, which is the delivery of justice to the Indian citizens.
A very quick follow-up questions. You've been arguing at the courts for decades now. While you are arguing a case before a judge, even to arrive at a point, he may be going through a process of making observations, which may be only his, in a sense, intentions is to arrive at a certain conclusion. And while he is doing so, that comment may be mistaken for some observation and then used against him in social media. Do you think judges, it is a way to just push judges into silence, and it will be nothing but submissions in court and orders, because judges will be like, if I speak something, it will be misquoted or misinterpreted, and then we'll have not a interactive court, but a court where submissions are made and orders are taken.
Look, I think the process of interaction between the judges and the counsel in the course of a hearing are invaluable both to the counsel and to the judges, because it is clearly helping us improve the quality of the debate, and it is focusing us on those issues which the honorable judges would like an answer to. I think this is an indispensable part of the process. If we were to get to a system where our judges are hesitant to ask and they sit, literally non-committal, non-communicative, then the situation is, we are not going to be able to do what we are all supposed to, which is contribute to ensuring that justice is delivered and the quality of justice delivered is at the highest level. I mean, can you imagine this? Today it's about words. Tomorrow somebody will say the body language of the judge, even if he's keeping quiet, is like X or Y or Z.
Because it's live streaming. So
it's live streaming. So what you're then saying is judges are supposed to be non-communicating. Judges are supposed in that manner almost to be sphinx-like, although in the delivery of justice, they must have a human touch. I think this is a far too great onus to impose on anyone. And in what is, in a manner, in the highest tradition of eliciting the best facts and the best arguments to do justice. And I think placing this sort of pressure through social media or any other media is not only imminently unfair, it's disruptive of the quality of our legal system.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shah. I know you were in traveling, but at a special request, you made time for this show and share your observations with us on this very important issue. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Tarun. Pleasure to be.
So you just heard Senior Advocate Amit Desai and Advocate Rohan Shah speaking on the remarks made by Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud. And now we are joined by three eminent panelists. I have with me Senior Advocate Seshadri Naidu. He served as Judge of High Court. I have with me Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari. I have with me Advocate Shravan Shankar. And let me just do a bit of context setting for you. This is about Justice Chandrachud saying that social media thinks that every remark of judge is a judgment. So even while they're asking questions in court, they're making a remark just to arrive at a conclusion. One statement that they make is just taken out of context. And many times armies of trolls criticize the judge. And then what happens is that there is an attempt made to create a certain impression which is far from reality. And we see it all too common these days. And that's why this issue is very important. And Justice Chandrachud, one of our most liberal judges, he's spoken pro-digital hearings, pro-live streaming of proceedings. When he says it, we have to stand up and take notice. That is why it's important. Let me start with Senior Advocate Seshadri Naidu. Your opening comment, please.
Yes. A judge is not an inscrutable sphinx. And the system suffers if the judge is reticent and doesn't express himself. And if he expresses himself, he suffers. And he chooses the later. And any advocate could tell you it is far easier to argue before a judge who interacts rather than who simply listens and decides. There's no way to know what's going on in his mind. And a judge, as you all know, plays the devil's advocacy. He's been seized of one fear, that he should decide correctly or that he may be deciding wrongly. To get over that fear, he has to speak. And he speaks. Once the petitioner is arguing, he dons the role of the respondent and vice versa. He always believes that that way he gets the best out of it. And you know pretty well how easy it is to misquote. You just take everything out of context, one sentence isolated, that gives a very weird interpretation to your mind. And that's why even as a cardinal principle of interpretation, we always say the text has to be looked in the context. First thing is, courts are not car panchayats, just to get swayed by the emotions. They are judicially trained, forensically skilled personnel. So whatever that's been going on in their mind, that has to come out so that the other person could have an opportunity of countering that or correcting that or supplying information in that perspective. So in that context, the judges do a lot of talking. And unfortunately, now it's going haywire. You know, the problem is we have all said that sunlight is the best disinfectant rather. And recently you could have seen an observation by Madras High Court about election commission. And then what has happened, you have seen. Incidentally, that has come before his lordship, now who expressed his fear, but he has still maintained that you cannot curtail the freedom of press when it comes to expressing. Whatever that happens, that has to be reported. But the only thing is, it has to be reported in the correct light, in the correct perspective. That may not be happening.
A quick follow-up question before I go to Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari. You served as a judge in the High Courts, I guess, of the Telangana, if I'm not wrong, and the Bombay High Court also.
Yes, Andhra Pradesh, then Karnataka, Kerala, and then Bombay.
Now you're a senior advocate at the Supreme Court, so you've seen both sides. So I want to know from you here that if judges are commented upon and criticized, even while they are in the process of arriving at a conclusion for which they have to make many statements when they ask, are we trying to push the judges into silence? That you make your submissions, we will not comment anything, we'll just give you the order copy and we'll just author the judgment, because the healthy debate gets impacted in court, because the judge always gets a feeling that just something may be taken out of context and he may be started to be criticized by lakhs of people on social media.
I'm afraid you're right. What happens, unfortunately, whether we accept it or not, now most of the judges have become very defensive and sometimes very reticent. And in some extreme cases, they are just playing to the galleries, which is a very dangerous sign. They wanted to be seen always in the correct light or in the favorable light. A judge always does an unpleasant task. He is not there to please anybody. But now you know the difference. News is faceless. So news doesn't impact people that much. But when it comes to social media, it is not news, it's information, because it comes from the people known to you, close to you. So you tend to believe it. That's the danger of social media. And what's the way to contain that? And some people, as you said, are vested, and some people just simply fall into the bandwagon and they join the jamboree just for the fun of it, because they've not been legally trained just to see that once a judge speaks, he only speaks not what he has in mind, but what he would like to have the clarification on. He never takes a stand until he decides the case. He vacillates, and he loves to vacillate, though it may not be virtue otherwise. For a judge, it's a virtue. He should be swinging both the ways until the pendulum stops at the cause of justice. That is to be the way. And people may not understand that. And it fuels.
Beautifully explained by Senior Advocate Sheshadri Naidu. We'll go to Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari. When you're in the course of arguing your matters in the Supreme Court of India or the High Court, if it's a big business matter, there are big numbers and amounts spoken. And if there is a constitutional matter, then those kind of questions are asked. So there is a healthy exchange always in the courts. Keeping what Justice Chandrachud said, what do you think is happening here? And how it could be different, say in the UK or India, because every democracy behaves differently in the terms of how the people behave. So the kind of criticism we see on social media here is very different from what you'll see in America or United Kingdom. Can you give us a perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Tarun. Tarun, I think first what the court has said, or what the remark the court made was, and I think it was absolutely correct remark to make, is that nowadays whenever a judge makes an off-the-cuff comment in open court, people think that itself is a judgment of the court. And that leads to erroneous kind of arguments on Twitter, on various social media platforms. I was doing a case recently in Supreme Court when a judge remarked, an honorable judge remarked, that can we rely on WhatsApp messages? Is WhatsApp admissible? Something like that came up in the course of an admission hearing. And next day I saw on paper that matter was reported that the court says that WhatsApp is not admissible. And that was such a wrong interpretation of some ancillary issue in a matter, which was just blown out of proportion. Now, that was a less, not a less controversial matter. Now, what happens is that in many hearings, when judges are hearing counsels and many counsels appear, and when they are trying to ask questions or they make a comment off the cuff, we jump to think that is what the judge is now thinking, that's what the judge is going to do, or that is what the judge thinks about that particular party, whether it's the petitioner or the respondent or defendant number 3 or 2. and we all start, there is this whole flurry that goes on social media, where people just start thinking that, oh, this person has been looked down upon, or the court has very vehemently frowned upon this particular aspect. And I think that creates a lot of confusion in the minds of a lot of people who are consuming this social media bit. So yes, we need to, social media itself and press itself needs to kind of be careful when they just take out one word or two words and they try and just show that that's some kind of a judgment. But what is very good is, notwithstanding this, no one is curtailing their right. No court has ever said, and no judge has ever said in the Supreme Court, that the off-the-cuff remarks that we make in court cannot be cannot be highlighted by the press or cannot be carried by.
They can be reported. They can be reported.
They can be reported. So that freedom is always there with the press. No one is curtailing that. But, with great freedom also comes great responsibility. And therefore, social media platforms and press should show some responsibility in kind of giving a true picture of this. Now, you have looked at it from one particular way of a judge expressing his thought and whether the judge is attacked on Twitter or not after that. Do you know what happens to counsels, especially counsels who are not senior advocates, like me and like my colleague who's here today? When we are arguing, many times we have judges ask questions, sometimes very pleasant questions. Sometimes they can also get very rude and angry if you're not making sense to them, and justifiably. Sometimes not that justifiable, we feel. Now, when you see that one comment on a particular legal press media, how much damage it can cause to the counsel who's arguing. Thankfully, till now, I've not been in that receiving end, and I hope I'm never there. But, I've seen occasions where young counsels or someone is trying to argue a case and suddenly social media picks up something that the judge may have said, probably irritated or probably justifiable. Not justifiable is a different question. But the judge may have just made that remark in a rush of things. The judge is not saying that counsel is not good or that counsel doesn't know how to argue, or stop asking that counsel to come to my court. But the flurry it creates. And I've noticed how WhatsApp messages start getting forwarded about that particular episode and about that particular counsel being on the receiving end of that court. So I think sometimes not only judges, but we lawyers also get into, it can cause a lot of stress to we lawyers also when we are appearing before a court where off-the-cuff remarks are being made.
I have one follow-up question before I go to Shravan Shankar. Yeah. Suppose you are doing a big matter which involves which has implications monetarily or otherwise. A judge may also ask contrary questions to arrive at a certain conclusion, just because he is also threshing out the truth there, in which he would end up making many glaring statements. But it is just an endeavor to thresh out the real meat of the issue. And many times we see that while that is on, certain people will take out, because of live streaming or otherwise, comments and then criticize the judge on social media, even while he's not made up his mind whether the case is going one way or the other, or simply that might not be the day when the case is being decided. Do you think it exerts a certain amount of pressure on the mind of the judge? Because judge doesn't live in an ivory tower. They are also exposed to media. They get home. They are accessing social media. Everybody accesses. They may not be on social media, but everybody gets to access it. Do you think this is getting to be a problem? Because in every important case, you will see these kind of attacks happening wherever there are people being impacted in a sense. Would you make a distinction between an organized attack where thousands of fake accounts start criticizing a judge and a normal comment by a few people? Because if we can see that a judge is targeted by armies of trolls, doesn't it seem to be an organized attack rather than a spontaneous, spontaneous eruption of emotions that you may have, that you're writing because you're feeling for something?
No, absolutely. There's a huge difference in that. When you have an army of trolls all geared up to make a particular attack because a particular off-the-cuff remark was made in the open court, I think that's extremely wrong, and there should be a system to kind of curtail that down, because that can really hamper the process of delivery of justice. You can't exert pressure on a judge when he's deciding, and the judge should have a freedom to ask any question that he thinks he needs to ask so that he can reach the right conclusion. And as the learned retired judge just said on the show, and very rightfully he said, we want to argue before judges who ask us questions, because that tells us how they are working in their mind, and if they have any doubts, we can clarify that. We feel very scared arguing before a judge who asks no question whatsoever. So and really the last thing I want is Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media to ensure that judges now come to court and they sit and they listen to you and they say, thank you very much, next matter, and judgment reserved. Because I would come out completely freaked out, not knowing what's happened, whether I've made any sense to that judge also or not in my course of my arguments. And if I am not making, so I think that freedom should be given to them. And yes, also freedom should be given to individual users who feel that if some comment was off the record, it was a bit OTT, then he should be able to tweet about it. There's nothing wrong in it. And therefore, Supreme Court has never said that don't publish our off the record comments, right?
Yeah, they never said that.
Also understand, Tarun. So the troll business, I think we need to look down upon it. Something needs to be done. But individual freedom is okay. Also, please remember, it's also a good pastime, right? Oh, this judge, in court number so-and-so said this today in this matter. It's a good.
No, judges may also be enjoying unless it gets to targeted trolling.
Correct. So unless it gets to target trolling, then it's really wrong. But, sometimes it's also good fun. And it also lightens up even our lives as lawyers. Because we have such stressful lives running between one court to another that, to hear that, this particular judge said this in this matter, it's a good coffee chat. And of course, that should not be taken away from all of us. That should be allowed. That should be, that's a part of life, mirch masala, and also, whether it's our live law, bar and bench, they also like to pull up one of these comments. And always, I've seen that, the responsible legal press, they always do the right comment in the right context.
Right.
It gets distorted when it is a non-legal press trying to take that comment and give it a twist which it does not deserve and it does not merit.
Point well taken.
There's a huge difference that I've seen when a legal media, social media platform is putting a comment and when a non-legal social media is putting a comment to kind of create some kind of a controversy when there is none.
Point well taken. Point well taken from Mr. Bhandari. I'll go to Advocate Shravan Shankar for your opening comment.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So my perspective in this is this. In democracy in general, we often criticize politicians, sometimes criticize bureaucrats, and rarely criticize judges. That is how it works. Now, we must understand from Doordarshan to Facebook or Instagram, the entire gamut of public discourse has changed radically. Now, it is not limited to 14 pages or 30 minutes of a news show. Now, it is endless and it can run 24/7. So from the days of gossiping on a tea stall or me reading a news and calling Tarun and saying, look, Tarun, I'm reading such and such news. Our interaction on public platform itself can become news, completely ignoring the source of the news. It will be accessible anytime and it will remain in public domain forever. Now, news should trend, but here what is trending becomes news. And all of this lacks credibility and accountability, all of which taking benefit of anonymity. So post-COVID, we have seen the trends going up. Courts have gone digital. So lawyers sometimes have started playing to the gallery. Judges are human, they will react. They react and that becomes news. So there is sometimes, in fact, in digital courts, there's one big disadvantage. There is so much pressure on the lawyer also to argue whatever the client says. Otherwise, the client will come and say, ye kyun nahi bola, wo kyun nahi bola.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because the client gives us 100 things to say. We filter down and say, look, we can't say all of them. We'll only put 10 things in the draft and the court will only appreciate one. But all of this to trickle down to the common man is very difficult. Now, all of which at a cost of what? Now, all of this works like a spiral, like an Inception movie. Just to put an idea into somebody, a dream in a dream, a discussion in a discussion. Today we are having this new show. There's a box called comment. Every news article has a comment. You comment. That comment becomes news. And that news ke niche comment. So it goes like a spiral, just to put an idea into somebody's mind. See, sometimes it could be without any agenda, but sometimes it is with agenda. To put something into a judge's mind, to think in a particular perspective beyond what is in the four contours of law, just to reach to a conclusion. So this more than freedom of speech, there sometimes goes by agenda. So this is something what is very dangerous to the present situation.
There's you pointed out this agenda, which is also very right, because with a preconceived notion, you start to criticize when a certain comment is being made. I'll go to Senior Advocate Seshadri Naidu at this point. Sir, a judge is going about his daily work and he is asking questions. Something gets picked up and there is a concerted effort made to pressurize, in a sense, using the might of social media. Do you think this is something we never saw before? And that is why, it's difficult to somehow even fathom how to deal with such things. It's not an easy, it is not an easy thing to deal with in that sense.
Yes, indeed. As Shrevant has been telling, it's a revelation. It's been still unfolding. And we've been trying to come to grips with that one. So perhaps as the time passes by, even the judges may get inured to that one and may be stoic in a sense. But nowadays, yes, all the judges are under tremendous pressure. Of course, most of them have been trained, have had the fortitude to ignore that one. Yeah. The problem is this. The question is whether it's organized trolling or spontaneous. It's very difficult to say. Yes, in some cases, it's been organized. You could have seen recent developments. In most of the cases, it's like an avalanche. How an avalanche begins with one pebble of ice or block of ice, then it rolls into a massive wave. That's how the social media builds itself on. It feeds on itself on. That's the problem there. And why can't we control? See, a newspaper, you can haul it up. You can put the responsibility or blame on it. But social media is faceless. It's meandering. It's ubiquitous, as Shrevant has said. This is the problem. And as Mr. Abhimanyu has said, yes, it is not the problem of judges alone. It's the problem of advocates too. Because I tell you, you have seen recently some video garbs of various high courts.
Yes.
See, when you're talking, you raise your hand, something like that one. If somebody could portray that, I try to hit you. It makes sense if my picture has been frozen and isolated.
Yeah.
So this is the problem we have been facing, the digital freezing and putting things out of context. And as you said, yes, it's an evolving problem. Perhaps the solutions will also be evolving. Until then, we have to. But I believe the judges have already been taking them into their stride, and they know only one thing, that they are tasked to decide correctly, come what may. I believe that's the attitude they've been displaying so far.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. And as we saw today, there were some very interesting inputs from Senior Advocate Seshadri Naidu, Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari, and Advocate Shravan Shankar. And as we also found out, it's an evolving issue, so the solutions will also be evolving. But it is important. Recently, Justice Pardiwala made a comment. Now, we had Justice Chandrachud who made this comment that, every remark can't be taken as a judgment. And that is why we took this up. I think we'll have to take this up again many more times, because I don't think this problem is going away in an instant. Important matters, there are constitution matters being heard every day, and soul-searching questions are asked by judges. And, there is every opportunity to, in a sense, misinterpret while they are going about their work. And that is why, and at a time when live streaming is on in many high courts and the Supreme Court also, the Chief Justice, and then sometimes we see. So this is an evolving problem as put, and the solutions will also be evolving. But I would like to appreciate that.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. In fact, what is very interesting is that all of this is told about, discussed about a court which has actually held 66A unconstitutional.
Yes. Thanks for that comment. We're almost out of time, but I have to thank
very well.
Senior Advocate Seshadri Naidu, Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari, and Advocate Shravan Shankar for making time on this very important issue. And thank you viewers so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.